Mr. Speaker, from Manitoba Hydro's most recent annual report, the delivery of 32.9 billion kilowatt hours of electricity at a cost of just over $1.78 billion means it costs Manitoba Hydro, on average, 5.4 cents per kilowatt hour to deliver electricity. Right. Can the Premier tell this legislature how much the Energy East pipeline will be charged for the electricity it uses? Will the rate be, at the very least, the actual cost to produce and deliver electricity to the pipeline?
And I would like to thank the member from River Heights for the question about whether or not what the rate will be for hydroelectricity if and when it's used on the Energy East pipeline, if and when it's approved by the National Energy Board. Yeah. We will be making a very vigorous intervention to ensure that water is protected in Manitoba and that communities are safe and that the environment is protected. And if they decide, if the project is approved by the National Energy Board, we will ensure that there's no subsidy on the energy if they choose to use Manitoba Hydro. I understand currently they use gas. If they want to switch to Manitoba Hydro, they will obviously have less greenhouse gas emissions and they will not be subsidized, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, it's difficult to understand why Manitoba Hydro is asking for a rate increase of 3.95% at the same time as the government is considering selling a large amount of power to the Energy East pipeline at much lower rates than Manitoba's residential customers will be paying. What? I ask the Premier to tell the legislature today, will the Energy East pipeline be charged the same rates as Manitoba's residential customers, including, should it pass, the proposed 3.95% increase?
Once again, we are going to make a full intervention to ensure that water is protected in Manitoba, that communities are safe, and that we also ensure that the environment is going to be protected. If and when that project is approved, and they decide to select Manitoba Hydro for their booster stations for that transmission, for that pipeline, we will ensure that there is no subsidy to that pipeline. I put that on the record with the member of the legislature, and when that day comes, we will make sure that there is no subsidy for that hydroelectricity if they choose to use it, Mr. Speaker. That will be our position.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier has repeatedly said that he does not support a Clean Environment Commission review of the Energy East pipeline. Liberals believe that instead of today's NDP government arrogantly dictating what is in the best interests of Manitobans, all Manitobans should be allowed the best possible input into consideration of the Energy East pipeline. What message are Manitobans expected to hear when today's NDP government limits public input on the Energy East pipeline by not holding Clean Environment Commission hearings, and at the same time, today's NDP considers providing power to Energy East at lower rates than Manitoba's residential customers pay?
Once again, Mr. Speaker, the member from River Heights clearly hasn't heard the answer I gave to the previous two questions. There will be no subsidized rate. There will be no rate that subsidizes any hypothetical use of hydro going forward. I do remind the member opposite that the Liberal Party of Canada supports the Energy East pipeline, and he's a Liberal, so he's supporting the pipeline. Presumably he thinks it's a good idea, Mr. Speaker. We want to make sure that water's safe in Manitoba. We want to make sure communities are safe. We want to make sure the environment is protected, and there's no subsidy for the pipeline for Manitoba Hydro. That will protect Manitoba ratepayers. That will protect Manitoba residential consumers and every other consumer in Manitoba. They will in no way be subsidizing a pipeline going through Manitoba, Mr. Speaker.